Hello and welcome to this episode of the Magnetic Woman Show. I am so excited because this is the first episode where we are also doing the video of the podcast and posting the video on YouTube. Let's be honest, it is way past time that I did this. And I'm really excited. So, if you have been listening to the podcast for a long time, thank you so much. If this is your first time watching the podcast, welcome. Thank you. I I love this podcast, and I'm so excited to expand it onto YouTube as well so that we can reach more women. And this year in 2026, I'm going to be doing a ton more interviews, which I love doing and you love listening to. And we're kicking off this like new version of the podcast with me talking about what I've been going through over the last 2 years. And while a lot of the details of what I've been going through over the last 2 years are personal, I think that a lot of the themes that I'm going to be talking about, that you're going to hear about, that you're going to be pulling from, are really, really universal. So for me, the last 2 years of my life have really been about uncaging myself. And I've entitled this series Diary of the Uncaged Woman. So I've done some content on this on other platforms as well, but I wanted to give you like one foul swoop of all of it. So the last 2 years for me, like the end, well, probably mid 2023 through the end of 2025, were really, really intense. I would say probably like the darkest night of the soul since my father passed away, the most death and rebirth personally, professionally that I've ever experienced. So let's back up to when this all started. And it was mid 2023. I was in a relationship, and quite frankly, I felt like I had lost myself. I lost myself in the relationship. I honestly would wake up with this like pit in my stomach, knowing that I was a shell of the woman that I knew myself to be, right? And I found myself heading to Greece because I just needed to travel. I needed to get away. And there was a group of other sensuality pleasure coaches meeting in Greece. And a friend of mine was organizing it. So I went and I was like, great, this is going to be the refresh that I need. This is going to be kind of the like kickstart to help get me back to myself. And there are times when trips, when vacations, when programs are that. They're just kind of like they help you plug back into yourself. And then there are the experiences that I had, which was I found myself there at this gorgeous villa overlooking the sea in Greece, like sunbathing naked. And we were doing like pleasure practices and different sensuality practices. And we did a like wild feminine practice. And there I was in Greece, overlooking the ocean. And as I'm moving through this practice, all I hear inside of me is, I will not be caged. I cannot go back into the cage. And while I thought this trip was going to be just a way for me to like find myself again, what it did was bring me to my knees and make me realize that the life I was living was not working on any front. And I knew in that moment I was going to have a lot of really difficult decisions ahead. And so, first thing up, of course, was the relationship that I was in. I felt really small. I felt like I had lost myself. I felt like I was overgiving, over functioning. It just was not working. But I didn't want to end it. I didn't want to give up on love. I didn't want to give up on all of this time I had invested in this relationship. And so when I got back home and I was with my, spoiler alert, now ex, we started having some really uncomfortable conversations. One of which was that I wanted to travel more. I had come back from this trip and I was like, I know what I want. I want to be traveling more. And he told me that would ruin our relationship and that he was hoping that I would finally be ready to have kids. Side note, the reason why I wasn't having kids at the time was because of his issues with alcohol. And I said, while yes, I want to have kids, I really want to travel right now. And he told me I was being selfish. And I knew that in order to stay in this relationship, I would have to constantly betray myself. I would have to give up on my desires. I would have to be a shell of myself. And even then, it still wasn't working. But I am nothing if not persistent. And so, of course, I tried for a few more months, right? I was like, maybe there's a way where I can take up more space, be my fullest expression, and this can work. And it all came to a flaming blaze of glory when we were away on an international trip and he got very drunk and physically threatened me. And honestly, that was divine intervention, right? It was the slap in the face. I had an out of body experience while this was happening. Like, is this truly what you want, Lauren? Clearly, the answer was no. I ended the relationship. There I was, 36, getting ready to host an international retreat. And so I thought, you know what? Let me move back to my mom's for a little bit until I kind of figure myself out. Now, the reason why I bring up my age is because we all know the narratives that we hear from the patriarchy around a woman's age, especially after 35, right? So while society is telling me I'm old, I'm dried up, I'll never have the life that I want, I moved back home to my childhood bedroom. And I mean, my goodness, right? Talk about, you know, irony. So I take off to host my retreat and I spend some additional time in Europe. I come back to the States and I really start to look at what went wrong in this relationship that I was in. And I started to see, especially as I was sharing with friends, that it wasn't just that, oh, I kind of got small in the relationship. It was that the relationship was toxic, that he was mentally and emotionally abusive. He had a serious issue with alcohol while we were together that he refused to look at. And of course, I own the fact that there were plenty of red flags that I looked past, plenty of times where I should have walked away and I stayed. And I stayed as I unpacked this stuff for a lot of reasons. One, when you're in situations like that, which I think so many powerful, successful women find themselves in relationships that are unhealthy, toxic, and abusive. And we find ourselves in those relationships because we have developed a deep sense of compassion and empathy because we are the type of women who are willing to problem solve. We're the type of women who believe in love and believe that people deserve forgiveness and respect and grace. And as I began to really unpack the relationship, I started to see how a lot of the reasons why I stayed in that relationship were due to societal patriarchal conditioning and a lot due to harmful polarity content that I was, of course, finding myself drawn to, right? Where it's like, well, just communicate in a more feminine way. Guess what? There is no more feminine way to communicate with somebody who is drunk and violent. There is no just communicate in a more feminine way so he will understand it if he is manipulative and abusive. And I think so many women, so many strong, powerful, smart women are learning about feminine energy, find themselves in, quite frankly, really harmful polarity content, and are trying to apply it to relationships that are not healthy, or rather, trying to apply it to relationships with someone who is not healthy. That's what I was doing. And so I kept thinking, well, maybe this is just a wound for me to heal. Maybe my jealousy that he keeps talking about other women is my insecurity. When in reality, it was my intuition being like, he is trying to make you feel insecure. All of the times that I thought maybe this is just my fear was my intuition. But we are so deeply conditioned as women to overlook our intuition, to override those gut feelings, to work on ourselves, to take on the emotional responsibility inside relationships, and to really just continue to pour into things that aren't working. And as I began to unpack what happened in the relationship, who I was, where my wounding was coming up, I had so much shame. I had so much shame. Why? Here I was, the magnetic woman, and I found myself in that relationship. Side note, he used to weaponize what I did all of the time. Anytime we would get into a fight, well, I thought you did this for a living. Shouldn't you be better at relationships by now? Right? So I had his toxic, abusive words in my head. I had society's toxic, abusive words in my head. Right? And it took me a long time to really pull apart the cognitive dissonance. Like, where was my truth in all of this? To really alchemize the shame, the guilt, the oh my God, how can I teach women how to be in their power if this was the relationship I was in, right? Thank God for sisterhood. Or should I say, thank Goddess for sisterhood, because it is my closest female friendships that helped me through that time. All the while, I'm still living with my mother in my childhood bedroom, which is painted purple, by the way, because I painted it when I was 12. So we're talking so much confronting of identity, of worth, of like what society tells us we should be, we should have, we should be doing versus what I was experiencing at 36, 37. And I found myself in all of this healing thinking, okay, let me just take the next year of my life and do all of the things I want to do, host all of the retreats I will ever want to host, have all of the experiences I will ever want to have. And then I can get into a relationship and think about having kids. And I had to stop myself. And I'm like, okay, this is a flawed premise, Lauren. This idea that I have to do everything I want to do before I get into a relationship, like that's not the relationship I want to be in, right? If I want to be in a relationship, I'm going to want a relationship that's just going to allow me to be more me. But since that is like how I'm coming at this, I need to take the idea of dating off the table, right? That's just something I need to not think about and definitely not give myself a timeline. And then, of course, here comes patriarchy in society. You're getting old, you're drying up, biological clock, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, what if I don't have kids? Now, I was raised Catholic. I went through 10 years of Catholic school. I always just assumed I would have kids. I'm great with kids. I love kids, right? And from probably my mid 20s, I was very clear that like deep, deep, deep desire to be a mother was not there. And in my last relationship, I told my ex this, like, I do not have a desire to be a mother so much that I will be a single mother, right? That I will do whatever it takes so I can have a child in this lifetime. I can see myself having kids with a partner who is in equal partnership with me. And so as I sat there and I'm like, let me take romantic relationships off the table for a minute. And what if I take the idea of not having kids? What if I take the idea of having kids off the table? and it felt like my world opened up. I instantly relaxed. I felt so excited. I felt like I don't have to rush this, right? And all the while this is kind of swirling, I find myself drawn to content around this new concept called decentering men. Now, if you haven't heard about decentering men, it's basically the process of decentering men and specifically the patriarchy from our lives as women. Because we're taught as women that men's wants, needs, desires, and emotions are the most important thing in any situation. Therefore, we need to make sure that the men that we're around feel comfortable around us. That's our responsibility. We need to make sure they feel good, their emotional state is okay, their needs, wants, and desires are met, and then we can look to ourselves. And as I started to like learn about decentering men, I realized I spent the majority of these 30 odd years of my life centering men, centering the idea of romantic relationships. Like, what would my life look like if I did not center this idea of, like, okay, let me date to get into the next relationship? What if I could center myself? What would that look like? And if I'm not having children, that means I truly am at the center of my life. And it felt scary because patriarchy teaches us the thing that we need to fear the most as women is our own power. And yet it felt so fucking exciting. So exciting. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be single by choice. Not this like I'm single, but I desperately want to be in a relationship. So I'm feeling like not picked or not worthy. I'm like, no, I am choosing to be single and I'm choosing to be child free. And I was like, this is amazing. While simultaneously, my business was burning to the ground. So, again, I told you, we're talking like multiple death and rebirth. A lot of the content that I had taught in my business up until that point was about dating, was about relationships. There was like polarity mixed in there. And not that the content I taught up until now is not good, is not valid, does not work. It definitely does. I wasn't interested in teaching it anymore. And trust me, I tried. And I was already kind of in this space in my business before ending my relationship where I was feeling so much more pulled to the sacred feminine, work around feminine archetypes, ritual, magic, Mary Magdalene, right? And you can see that. You could see that in my business, right? Like these things were starting to be woven in more and more. I was like, I don't want to talk about dating. I don't want to talk about relationships. I don't want to talk about anything to do with men, period, full stop. And so I had to really look at not only the content in my business, but the identity, the magnetic woman. So much of it was like wrapped up in polarity. So does that still apply? And it felt like everything I was doing in my business would not work, no matter what I tried, just was not working. And I'm not going to lie, it took a huge hit on my confidence, which was already taking a hit from the relationship I was in. So 2025, when they say was the year of the snake, girl, did I experience the year of the snake? Okay, so much fucking shedding, so much fucking release. And I don't know why my computer keeps like zooming in and out, but um my income took a huge hit. My confidence took a hit. I had to really look at the stories I had created around like my ability to lead, my ability to market. Like, what were these things tied to, right? They're tied to income, they're tied to numbers in my programs, all this stuff. So it was like this constant pulling apart of like, where have I tied my sense of enoughness to anything outside of myself? Where have I tied a sense of good enough or like confidence to anything outside of myself? I call 2025 my cave year. Like I didn't travel that much. I I really was just home again in my childhood bedroom, healing, leaning into ancestral wisdom and magic. Like I was doing so much reading about witchcraft and Southern Italian mysticism and Celtic mythology and, really looking at, wow, where am I still like looped into the patriarchy? Where am I still looped into this bullshit idea that men are in any way superior to women, that their feelings are more important, that their feelings are more valid, that their safety and like their ego is more important than my safety or my comfort, right? And it again felt like I was coming out of this cage again and again and again. We don't realize how deep this conditioning is till we begin to unpack it. We don't realize how intense the internalized misogyny is until we start to address it. We don't realize how we have put men, their feelings, their wants, their needs, their desires on pedestals until we take them off and we're like, wow, it's so uncomfortable to put myself on that pedestal. And so, through all of this, what has really emerged is the concept of the self centered woman. Now, am I still the magnetic woman? Fuck yes. Like, ironically, the more I decenter men, the more men flock to me, right? The more I care less about men's feelings over my own, the more they're begging to take me out on dates, right? And you should see men's faces when I tell them, like, I'm not really dating. They're in shock. Like, who does this woman think she is that she's like not dating, you know? Um, but through all of this more grounded, more mature, more self-assured, more like intrinsically confident version of myself has emerged. And I am so fucking excited for all that that means and 2026 and beyond. And so, as this concept, this like new iteration of my brand has emerged, the self centered woman. And really, it's about the woman who puts herself at the center of her life. Now, before you get your panties in a fucking bunch over there, if you have kids, yes, of course, your children are also at the center of your life. But you are going to be a much better mother if you prioritize your wants, needs, and desires, period, full stop. You will be a much better mother, partner, friend if you prioritize your wants, needs, and desires first, foremost. Now, of course, are there going to be situations where that's not possible or that's not the case? Are there going to be situations where, you know, yes, you want to prioritize yourself, but you can't? Yeah, of course. The path of the feminine is not a strive for perfection. It is not a striving for a static state. The path of the feminine is a continual path of becoming. The path of the feminine is continual death and rebirth. The only constant on the path of the feminine is change. You already know this if you live in a female body, right? Your hormones are changing every fucking week. And if you're pregnant, guess what? Your body's changing all the time too because you're pregnant, you know? And then you get to menopause and you go through perimenopause and menopause. Like our bodies are constantly changing. We are used to that. We are used to constant change. But the patriarchy, capitalism, social media wants to have you believe and buy into this idea of striving for a static state of perfection. If I just get to X amount in my business, then I'll be good. If I just get X amount of clients, then I'll allow myself to have what I want. If I just like finally reach multiple six or seven figures, then like I can just coast for the rest of my life. But the truth of the matter is, at this point in my life, in my business, which I've had for almost a decade now, I would not hire a mentor who hasn't had to burn it all to the ground and rebuild because that is inherently feminine. And if there's somebody who's been in business for like 10 years who hasn't had to burn something to the ground and rebuild, I don't trust them. right? Maybe they have a physical product, but even then, trends change. What the market wants changes. One of the most underrated skills that I have, I'm not going to say perfected, but that I've really gotten a lot of practice in over the last year is the death and rebirth. If you are a woman leader, a feminine leader, and you do not have a handle on the death and rebirth process, things are painful. I mean, death and rebirth is painful, right? But the more tools you have to approach the death and rebirth process, the more rituals that you have, the more that you're held in mentorship that can actually hold these types of initiations, the quicker you flow through them. And so when I look at the last 2.5 years, some of the most painful experiences of my life, without a doubt, some of the most confronting experiences of my life, without a doubt. And yet, that pain, that confrontation led me to burn the fucking cage down. And now I'm only available to work with women who want to uncage themselves, who want to unshackle themselves from the patriarchy, from the internalized misogyny, from centering men. I am only available for the self-centered woman. I'm only available to be self-centered. Is there a shadow side of being self-centered? Yes. And I do not think that women like us who are deep into personal development, who are empathetic, who are compassionate, who also, let's just call a spade, are against the current administration, are going to really be living in the shadow side of self-centeredness. There is so much connotation around the idea of being a selfish woman. There is so much fear around being seen as selfish, being seen as a bitch, being seen as, somebody, a woman who has boundaries. And women like us who, chances are, you have people pleasing tendencies, you might be an eldest daughter, you're an overachiever, you're highly driven, you feel this desire to create things in the world that help people, that change people's lives, that you want to have wealth because you want to be the fullest expression of yourself, but because you also want to give to your communities and people in need, and you want to be circulating wealth in a way that is so much better than the BS patriarchy has been doing it. You have to work through the fear of being seen as selfish, which again is why this era, this next chapter of my business is about the self-centered woman, because I think what we need right now more than ever in society and in humanity is women who are self-centered, women who are spiritually grounded, read not evangelical Christian, women who are grounded in feminine spiritual practices, women who are driven to create movements, revolutions, to have huge impacts in the world, women who want to and who are creating, holding, generating wealth in the world, women who are prioritizing themselves. We have had 2,500, if not 5,000 years of men being the star of the show at the detriment of everything and everyone else. It's time to kick them off the fucking stage and for you to take center stage, my love. And again, I give you this kind of like peek behind the curtain into specifics of my life Because as one of my very first mentors used to say, what's most personal is most universal. I know that I am not alone in being in a toxic, abusive relationship as a strong, powerful woman and holding shame about that and thinking that that somehow makes me unworthy or not good enough to teach about certain things. I know that I'm not alone in having a massive fucking contraction in my business and my income taking a huge fucking hit as I let go of all of the things that weren't working and weren't meant to come with me in this next iteration. I know that I am not alone in 2025 being a massively confronting year full of death and rebirth. I know I'm not alone now sitting here in 2026 with so much grief, so much rage for everything that's occurring worldwide, globally right now, and especially here in the United States because that's where I live, and simultaneously having huge desires, having all of these things that I want to accomplish this year, all of these things that I want to experience this year, and doing everything I can all day, every day to reach for pleasure, to know that me being well resourced and really relaxed in my nervous system is the only way to fight everything that is happening globally. I know that I am not the only woman who has met multiple death and rebirths in a short period of time, and it's taken a huge hit on their confidence. And so what I want to say to you is, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to that. I really look forward to expanding my podcast onto YouTube, as I said. And if you want to be held in the threshold that you are currently experiencing, right? This like you're in the world between worlds, things are ending, whether it be in your business, in relationships, in other aspects of your life, and you're not fully landed in where you want to be. I've opened one of my very favorite ways to work with women, which are intensives. The Threshold Intensive is available. These can be done in person over 2 days, which is like the most epic, luxurious, like solo retreat experience, one-on-one retreat experience that you could ever imagine. And there's a virtual option as well. You can go to themagneticwoman.com/threshold to secure your spot, and they are 25% off until the end of January. So for like a week, when this airs, you get to be held, you get to be supported. What got you to where you are now is not going to get you to where you want to go. We've heard this again and again and again. And there's something to be said for really powerful women allowing themselves to be held at this initiation, through this initiation. Because for women like us, yes, we can do tons of journaling, we can do identity work, we can do a lot of things. And there is something about being held in an initiation that is unlike anything else. And if I do say so myself, one of my most natural inherent gifts is initiating women. Being in my energy is an initiation. So these intensives really are for the women who are ready. Like you want to stop feeling like you're kind of at the edge of the cliff and you're like ready to jump, but you kind of keep stopping. You're ready to jump, but you keep looking back like maybe if I just sell this program I did 4 years ago, that'll work. And it doesn't work. And then you're like, okay, I think I'm ready for the next. Like, think of me as the parachute that is you're strapping on and you're ready to jump off so that you can actually land. Like you're terrified of jumping off without the parachute, and so you're not jumping. Let me help you jump. Let me help you jump into the next iteration of yourself. Let me help you by holding this initiatory space for you to go into the next evolution of yourself. Spots for the Threshold intensives are extremely limited, especially in person. So we have some really incredible cities that we're meeting up in for the Threshold intensive. So you can come to Pittsburgh, which if you come to Pittsburgh, I cover your hotel and you get to stay at one of my favorite hotels in the city. Uh, we can also meet up in New York, Miami, LA, Chicago, or Salem if you want like a very witchy initiation. I will have spots available for Europe in the spring. So if you're curious about that, you can reach out and secure a spot. And spots for the virtual intensives are also very limited. When I work with women one on one in this capacity, it is deep, it is potent. Like we're talking months and months worth of high level mentorship in the matter of an afternoon or a day, right? So I can only take so many a month. So if you're interested, there is a way that you can secure your spot. There are payment plans available. There are all the things. You can reach out to me. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would absolutely positively love it if you gave it 5 stars, left a review, and if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe. I'm going to be bringing so much more on YouTube in 2026. We're going to be doing a lot more lifestyle stuff, a lot of other content. We're going to be having more podcasts and interviews here. So stick around. Thank you again for listening. And I love you.